We made this.
Hello and welcome to Life's Milestones, the podcast here on the We Made This podcast network about life's milestones. That's birth and naming ceremonies, relationships and weddings, and death and funerals. I'm your host Mark, and I am a Humanist Celebrant. That means that I am accredited and trained by Humanists UK to be a life cycle celebrant. That is, someone who can perform non-religious namings, weddings and funerals for you. My guest this time is a friend of mine, Carl Bryan. Carl Bryan is one of those wonderful people who will do anything for anybody. He's such a lovely man, and I do mention in the interview with him that he created the logo for this very show. He also created the logo for all of the other podcasts that I do as well, but I'll talk about that after the interview with Carl. I have podcasted with Carl lots of times, so again, I'll tell you at the end of the show where you can find more of us chatting if you did enjoy what you were listening to. Before the interview, I'm just going to quickly update you with some celebrant news. The High Court has ruled for the legalisation of humanist marriages. Basically, this landmark case means that it's not a matter of if humanist marriages will be legally recognised in England and Wales, but when. And by law, that means that English and Welsh non-religious people have been discriminated against, and it is now time for the government to act. Anything more than that, we are waiting on the reforms that the government have to work on. As always, just a quick reminder that any regular listeners to Life's Milestones get a 10% discount off a wedding or a naming ceremony from me. All you need to do is when you get in touch, use the code Milestones. Right, so, next up is my chat with Carl. Carl has had a lot of tragedy in his life. He's very stoic about it and happy to talk about it, but the reality is there is some sad stuff in this week's episode, but very much in a positive light, and Carl wants to come on here and talk candidly so that people can understand how it feels, and maybe he might be able to help people by being so open and honest. So with that being said, I'm going to hand over to my interview with Carl. With me at this time is Carl Bryan. Hello, Carl.
Hello there, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. Welcome to Life's Milestones. And I'm glad to have you on because you are the man who designed the Life's Milestones logo for me. So big up on air to Carl. Brilliant designer. Thank you so much for sorting that out for us.
Oh, not a problem. I'm quite pleased with it. I'm glad you like it.
It's pretty.
It is the one I'm probably one of the most pleased with out of all the ones I've done. I've made a few for yourself and for the network, and I think this is the one that looks probably the nicest out of all of them.
It's nice and stylish. I mean, I gave you a vague idea, but you just kind of like knocked it out of the park with the different birth and marriage and death certificate thing. That's kind of subtle, but if you look at it, you're like, oh.
I'm glad you like it.
So, you know the format, you've listened to the show. Should we just get straight onto it?
Absolutely.
All right. Carl, how old are you?
I am 38 years old, just at the time of recording.
So, do you know, I try and get a nice mix of people on, but it's been mostly people in their 30s and 40s so far. And then again, I suppose that's because I'm in my early 40s. I hadn't really intended it. I've just approached people that are friends most of the time. And I think I need to mix it up and get maybe a teenager on or an older person on. 50s and 60s I've not touched at all. Do you feel that you're the same as me? Do you have mostly friends around your own age?
I do. I have quite a few that are younger purely because of the nature of my work. I work in an independent cinema/art museum, so we do tend to take on quite a few younger folk for museum adjudicators and things like that. And we have a cafe area. We tend to hire younger people for that. So I do kind of go the gamut in terms of age range, because we have some older people that work with us. We have some younger ones, but I've kind of stopped asking about age because we're all fairly similar in our tastes and things like that.
Yeah, I've found that it's more about tastes and leisure activities than it is age, I guess.
Yeah, there's some things that the age difference is noticeable. Like, for example, if I ever go anywhere with some of the staff, a group of the younger ladies that work together, they will go, right, let's go out and party, and I'll be like, yeah, you go do that, because I'm gonna go home. Yeah, I can definitely empathise with that. It was a moment I had when I think we went on a staff night out, where, because it was mostly a group of us who were the same age and the younger people had gone off to a club, and we went, we're going to go there because it's cheaper, party, party, party. You know, it's sort of, that place is quieter. Let's go there. Yeah. What I like about this show is that it's deliberately diverse. I do definitely need to get some younger folk on, I think, and some kind of like boomer folk as well. That would be good. Yeah. But, so where are you from, and what's your background? I am from a place called Riddings in Derbyshire, which is about half an hour outside of Derby. And from there, it's what my background is. There's myself, there was my mother and father, and my sister, who's my half-sister. We have different dads, and my nephew, who's now, how old is he now? Nearly 28. So there's a 18-year difference between myself and my sister, and say, my parents are no longer with me. They haven't been for about 12 years, 12, 15 years. So that's kind of, we had a sort of small unit. It's quite a big family, but over the years, we weren't that close to begin with, if you get what I mean. So it's only really kind of trimmed down to that immediate group of myself, my sister, and my nephew, really. That is an unusual situation, though, that you're kind of like in between the ages of your sister and your nephew. Yeah, it's talking about sort of different tastes and things. Like, me and my sister, and I think she'll be alright admitting this as well, we don't have a great deal in common, sort of taste-wise. We get along, obviously we love each other, we're family, but I think if we weren't family, we met each other, we probably wouldn't hang out or do anything like that. We are very different people. Me and my nephew get on quite well, but again, we're both quite different. He works as a DJ down in London. He sounds pretty cool. He's a reggae sort of dub and bass DJ, and he's about 6'4". He's this huge, tall, pale white monolith. Okay. In a reggae sort of scenario, he sticks out. Is probably the best way of putting it. I think it's really funny because all the DJs are a good 2 foot shorter than him. Brilliant. I am so proud of what he does, but I'm not a big fan of the music he plays. Yeah. And he knows that, and we get on better. Sort of, it's a sort of compromise almost that we've found is, I'm proud of you, but I won't listen to it half the time. Yeah, and I think that's a family thing, isn't it? My brother, for example, he's done a lot of charity work abroad in African countries, and I'm so proud of him, but my goodness, I'd have never done it. Yeah. I think that's part of the thing I'm proud of is that he found something that, like, from where we're from, it was only a small village, and for him to find something that's he loves so dearly, and that he wouldn't have found if he'd stayed at home. He went to university. He was one of the first in our family to go to university. And he discovered this and what he loved. And he ran with it, because my sister will have the mum thing of, when are you going to get like a proper job, in inverted commas. And I keep telling her, and I'm sure he does keep telling her, he has got a proper job. It's just a bit more risky in terms of pay. Yeah. But he loves it, and it's a thing that I'm slightly envious in him as well, in that he's found something that he loves so much, and he can do that as his career. So,
what do you do rather than your nephew? What do you do that makes you interesting?
What do I do that makes me interesting? I podcast as well. I podcast with you.
You do?
I also have my own podcast, which will have launched by the time this goes out. I also run things like I run a quiz night at the Art Gallery Independent Cinema where I work. I also run a night showcasing local short filmmakers, and as it's gone on, more around the country.
Brilliant.
Obviously, we're a bit grounded at the moment with what's going on, but hopefully we're going to be back up and running later in the year, if not the start of 2021. So there's always been that sort of creative wanting to showcase things or wanting to talk about things, which is weird because back in the day, I wouldn't talk to anyone. I wouldn't say boo to a goose. And then it was going to college where I kind of bit the bug of filmmaking, which brought it out of me.
Yeah.
A couple of the lecturers said to me when I was leaving, we wouldn't have expected who we met on the first day to be who we're talking to now.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because I lived in a small village when every place I sort of went to school or things like that were outside of the village, so I didn't have the thing of going and just hanging out with kids on my street on the weekend. And I think a lot of kids in that village did the same thing, in that I was the only one who went to my secondary school. Everybody else went to one of the other two.
Right. So
I didn't have that many in my home village that I was particularly close friends with either. So it was a strange existence, to be fair.
Well, tell you what, we will properly plug all your creative stuff at the end of the podcast, and let's go on and talk about birth and childhood right now, because we've kind of already got into it. So let's go that way forward now, yeah?
Righto.
So, when and where and how were you born?
I'm not going into the full graphic details of how. We both know.
Well, you say that, but the first guest I ever had, his response was, through the vagina, lol. He was 72 when he cracked that gag.
Oh, right. Bless him.
Oh, Guy. He's one of my favourite people. But anyway, we know how. Maybe I should just move that from the question. When and where were you born?
I was born on the 28th of June, 1982, at 2 in the morning. And I was 8 pounds and 8. And the only reason I know this is I've got a little pewter mug that my parents had engraved at the time that has a cuckoo clock with the 2 weights underneath with the weights on and what time I was born on it and my name on the back in case I ever forget.
Oh, that's lovely.
But that's how I know, as I was born first thing in the morning.
Right. That's so lovely. What a nice thing for your parents to do. I think mementos of stuff that you can't remember can become super important.
Yeah, I've got all my father's, I've got all the family sort of photo albums and things like that, and when I was going through it, I found a book. It was very, very old, but it was the book my grandparents put together when my dad was born. Right. With things like, today he took his first step, today he spoke, things we got sent when he was born. There was ribbons in there and things like that. So stuff like that is interesting, especially seeing as I've said, he's not with me anymore. So it's interesting to look at that and see what was going on at the time.
Do you think that stuff like that, it's initially very important for the parents to have this kind of memento album, but you've said that you've lost your parents. Do you feel that when you lost your parents, that suddenly became more important to you than it ever was once you'd lost them?
Yes, I'd say so. I mean, I didn't even realise I had this for a while. It was in a storage case where I'd kept a lot of things. I'd kind of locked it in there to keep it safe so it didn't, get any damp on it or anything like that. But especially things like the photo albums. Yeah. Because I was going through them the other day because I'm rebooking them, but there's things in there that I don't remember. My long-term memory is not fantastic. Right. So there's things like holidays and stuff like that where I look at it and go, I don't remember that. or I have a very, very, very short glimmer of it because I was so young at the time.
Yeah.
And probably just from trauma, I've probably blocked a lot of it out. But yeah, it's interesting because it's like, oh yeah, you know, I didn't realise I'd been to some places until I'd seen photographs of them.
Good grief.
And it's odd. I didn't think I'd done things like that where I'd blocked stuff out. But it turns out I have quite a bit of stuff. And it's interesting.
It's almost like a sitcom cliche that people avoid seeing photo albums and slideshows from their folks. And that's something that I definitely have done. Oh, son, I recorded our holiday to Thailand. Would you like to come and see? No, I don't want to see that, Dad. But maybe I will once my dad's died, you know?
It does help because, and this is strange, I don't know if this is the case for the people, as time goes on, I would say for me it's been a good 10 to 15 years, you almost can't remember if their voices are what their voices actually were, or if it's what you remember them as being, if you get what I mean.
Yes. My dad doesn't sound like the impression I just did, at all.
No. But, because sometimes I'll try and remember stuff, and was that his voice? And it's sad, because I don't have any recordings of them.
No.
Just because of at the time I just didn't have anything. And the thing that, say, upsets me if I think about it too much is they passed away when I was just about to turn 18. And I've gone through a lot of change since then, and there's no pictures of them with me as a man. And they'll never know how I turned out, and I'll never be able to show them how I turned out, which is sad.
It is.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're going to talk more about death later on in the podcast, but tell me a nice story, a favourite story from your childhood, one that you can remember.
I remember, so when I was younger, we always used to holiday inland. We never went abroad, and for a good few years, we'd go to Great Yarmouth. Okay. And this, for me, I didn't realise that this kind of thing was in Britain, if you know what I mean. It was sort of like, like pleasure beaches and all this stuff. This is like, Disneyland and things like that. And it was just nice seeing, because as we've talked about on other podcasts, I grew up in a newsagent, so my parents would work from like 5 a.m. till 11 o'clock at night every day. It was just nice wandering around and seeing them enjoy themselves, if you get what I mean. Not that working was a turgid existence, but them being able to, just the little things of them being able, like, I slept until 7, which for everybody else would be like, yeah, but for them it's like, no, I've missed the day, things like that.
Yeah.
Seeing them, I've got photos of them here behind me, and the ones I chose to put on display, I'm not in, because I like seeing pictures of them enjoying themselves. Because that's how I want to remember. Because obviously, towards the end, there's a lot of stress. My mother passed away with cancer, so when that happened, there was a lot of things like that, and it wasn't particularly pleasant. My dad had medical issues since he was like 25.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff there which I choose to not remember, and the only problem is it's interspersed with all the good stuff. So
right.
A lot of like my happier memories are very generalised almost, because it's things that were always there. But then there'd be things like my dad would play pranks on me. Like all the way home one day we'd gone out for a Sunday afternoon. He told me I was going to have, he was going to cook when we got back, and we were going to have bread and pullet. Okay. I don't know if you've ever heard this joke, but all the way home, it's like, oh, it's delicious, and blah, 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 blah. I was like, oh, I'm really looking forward to this, And we got home, he took a loaf of bread out of the bread bin, put it in front of me. I was all sat at the table. He goes, just pull that towards you. And I grabbed it, pulled it, and goes, there you are, that's bread, and pull it. I couldn't believe I'd fallen for a joke this was like 2 hours of him telling me how great this was. Just things like that, and silly little things you remember. I find it's never like the big things. It's always the little, like my mother towards the end, she wore a wig, because of chemotherapy, and just the thing of her sometimes, like, she still wanted to work, so she still went into the shop every so often if she wanted to. Just things like once for a laugh, she went in with the wig skew-whiffed, like a baseball cap, tilted. And I thought that was hilarious, stuff like that, and things like that are my main sort of memories. I'm sure there's others that I can't think of off the top of my head, but as I said, a lot of it I don't remember is not the right word, but I've kind of locked away a little bit.
Right, makes sense in a lot of ways. Do you have children yourself?
No, I don't. No, I've got a godson.
Okay.
But I've not got any children of my own, no.
So, are you planning on having kids?
I and ah about it, because I can only just about look after myself. So if you gave me a child, I don't know what I'd do. On the other hand, I love kids. Sort of, as we're recording this right now, my best friend is in the labour ward with his partner, about to give birth to their firstborn.
Good grief. And
my other best friend had his on the 2nd of the month, so we're about a couple of weeks in from his firstborn being born. So I've got those two. I've got my other friend who's got his little daughter. I've got my godson. The problem is, I've kind of got kids by proxy.
Yeah.
I think at the moment for me, it'd be I'm fine with not having children. I have the odd moment where I go, because that's kind of your legacy, isn't it? It's, the family name goes on, but I kind of don't need that, because I've got my nephew. Even though my nephew's got a different name from me, he's kind of following on the family line, I think, better than I could. But I don't know about children yet. Also, I'm getting older, and I don't know, so...
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in, I'd flippantly call it, borrowing other people's kids.
Yeah.
In a similar situation to you. My nephew and niece are brilliant, and I'm a scout leader. And with those two things, combining, basically spending a lot of time with young people, I kind of feel like it's all I need.
Yeah, I mean, I used to work for Sky Television, training people on their call centres. So they used to come in, spend 3 weeks with me, go work on the floor. And a lot of them were late teens, early 20s for the most part. And I found teaching them incredibly satisfying, to the point where, you almost do kind of, not to them, although I think I did a couple of times, a bit like, there go my kids, I'm so proud of them.
Yeah.
And, you get a bit like that. And that sometimes goes in with the... I quite like to have a kid of my own. And I think what I'm really thinking when I think that is, if I'm brutally honest with myself, I'd quite like a kid that's already gone through the baby stage.
Yeah, you don't want to be dealing with nappies.
I could do it, but I don't know how. I'm sure a lot of people, my friends, a lot of them, who've got kids, you go, I couldn't see them as a father until they became a father. Or until they became a mother, and then, their entire mindset changed. And that would probably happen to me. But, I don't know. Plus, no women let me near them at the moment, so there's always that as well.
Oh dear. I'm sure that's not true.
If you're out there.
So, you may not be having kids yourself. Have you ever been to a naming ceremony or a christening that you thought was particularly memorable?
I've been to a couple. I went to my nephew's. That was quite memorable. I've not been to any in a long time, I don't think, actually. I don't know if a lot of my friends actually had their children christened. Because it's... Myself and a lot of people I know are not religious people.
Yes.
So, I'm trying to think that they probably have them registered. You can have them registered if you don't want a christen ceremony, can't you?
You have to, legally. You have to legally register a birth.
I think a lot of people, especially if, a lot of them only got married not long before they had kids, so I think the expense of the wedding and then the I'm very much of the mindset that I don't see the point in throwing a 1-year-old a birthday party because they're not going to remember it. A 2-year-old, absolutely, but it's I don't see the point in the going for a christening if you're not religious, unless it's sort of pressure from the outside family. If it would mean a lot to the family, I kind of understand. But no, I was christened, and my father was christened, I think. I only found out my father had a middle name after he died. Because he never mentioned it. Never once mentioned it. And I found his christening certificate, and it said his middle name was James. And he never mentioned it.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, I haven't been to one in a long time, but I have been to one. I don't know how much different they are these days. I might have worked one when I was working as a sort of wedding photographer, videographer. I can't remember now. But yeah, not for a long time.
That's something that you think should be reclaimed by the non-religious then? No,
not really. Maybe I don't think it needs to. If the non-religious are looking to reclaim them, maybe it doesn't have to take place. There's a lot of pomp and circumstance around it. If the non-religious are going to claim it back, then it'd be very different, I can imagine, because you wouldn't need the water.
No.
And because it is probably one of the more religious ceremonies there is, because there's the water, there's the whole genuflecting with the water on the head, and things like that. And to me, if you're not religious, none of that needs to be a thing.
Yeah, and I think there is an element of that, and naming ceremonies are widely regarded as the least popular of the 3 ceremonies that a Humanist Celebrant would do. But they also tend to be the ones that people like the most. I completely get what you're saying. They're a luxury, but they can be so lovely. And I think what Humanist naming ceremonies do really well is creating mementos for the children to have as they grow up. Like, for example, one that I did, all the family did a piece of art where they all put their handprint on a piece of paper and then they framed it, and then the baby would then have that as something to represent their family for the rest of their life and something like that.
Yeah, I mean, things like that I am up for. If obviously we've known each other a while, I know you are a humanist, but I've never asked what a humanist naming ceremony has entailed in it. That kind of thing is cool, and I suppose is that one of the upsides I'm not looking at here is it introduces a lot of the family to the new member of the family who may not necessarily be around all the time.
It's a lot like a wedding in some ways. Is you have like this ceremony where you have your symbolic gestures. You might have parents' promises. You might have guide parent promises. Love the term guide parent. I think it's lovely. And incorporate what you want. Make it personal in the same way as you would with a humanist wedding. And then you have a party afterwards. It's a lot like a wedding in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I'd say that a lot of the times it is, even funerals, because I've probably been to more funerals than anything else. A lot of it is in this sort of the meeting of everybody afterwards. And like, obviously you wind up meeting people that you've never met previously and you'll probably never meet again. Like, my mum had 4 sisters and 5 other way around. 5 sisters, 4 brothers. It was like one of 9 or one of 10.
That's a lot of siblings.
Yeah. I met an uncle who I'd never met before. I've never met again. And no one had seen for about 25 years. And he turned up for the funeral and kind of sat in the corner and talked to a couple of people, and then he left.
Good grief.
And that was interesting. Uncle Rex.
Uncle Rex has got a cool name.
He does. He looked a bit like Howard Marks in the sort of, he's had a very good time in life.
Right.
And I just remember saying to somebody like, who is that? Because it was in like a local pub we'd rented, and I thought, oh, somebody's wandered in. Just thinking it was the pub, and they went, that's your Uncle Rex. I was like, oh, I thought Uncle Rex was a joke.
Good grief.
That didn't exist. And they went, no, that's him. And yeah, he hung around for a bit, smoked cigarettes and left. And I've never seen him since. He's probably passed away himself, but yeah, it's... So that, yeah, I understand the ceremony in terms of the social aspect of of meeting the family and maybe even reconnecting some bridges. But the religious side of it, the water and things like that, I don't feel like if I did have kids, I'd do a humanist ceremony, because I've never been religious as much as, you know, schools try and drill it into you and things like that.
Should we move on and talk about marriage?
Mm.
Okay, so the first question's an obvious one. Are you married?
I'm not, no.
Okay, so do you want to get married? Do you believe in marriage?
Yes, I do. I think I do believe in marriage. I've been to a lot of weddings. A lot of my friends are married. I think it's something... I'm trying to think of the right way to say it. The affirmation, the declaration of love in that you and I, we're together till the end. I like that about a wedding. I just think it's... Especially now that you can have humanist weddings and things like that. So it's not about you can't have a child out of wedlock and the laws and of God and things like that. It is now you can adjust it to how you want it, which is what you want it to be, being a declaration of love.
Yeah.
And my friends got married a couple of years ago, and it was absolutely beautiful. I believe it was a humanist ceremony. I don't believe it. No, it was a priest, but it was non-denomination. So it was a very nice wedding, and then afterwards it was all about sort of talking about, like, my friend talked about his wife in a way that we've all known him a good 20 odd years. We'd never heard him be that emotional about anything. Like, my other friend I was sitting next to burst into tears. And I'd never seen that before either. It was great because he was sort of like, "What are you crying for?" I was like, "It's so emotional," and he was almost taken by surprise by the fact he burst into tears. I was holding it in myself, to be fair, but I made a stir the stuff.
Is that right?
Totally.
You were the tough guy, the rock.
Yeah, I don't cry at films on my own at all. But yeah, it was such a beautiful day, and I think a lot of that was to do with it was planned by them almost down to the T, but in a way that it was just lovely. It was a big moment. Like, it was in New York. We went to New York for it.
Amazing.
Yeah. And we rode in an old town car, and they married in Central Park, and then we went into Brooklyn. And we went into a bar, and the bride played bingo at the bar in a wedding dress.
Brilliant.
So if I was to get married, I'd do it like that, to be honest.
If it was in the States, the laws are very, very different regarding who can work as an officiant. So I think he may have been a religious officiant, but he didn't need to be a priest at all. So that's probably almost equivalent to a civil celebrant in Britain, but it would have been a legal marriage, whereas a civil celebrant wouldn't be a legal marriage in Britain. And as you probably know, humanist ceremonies are campaigning for humanist marriages to become legal, like they are in Scotland, in England and Wales. But from my knowledge of the American market, I think he was a religious man with a very, very easy to get certificate of being able to marry other people. He probably paid less than $50 for the privilege of being able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, when my other friend got married, obviously they went to the registry office first, and then they did the ceremony, and the ceremony was conducted by our other friend who'd registered to do it online, I think.
Right.
So they'd done it officially at the registry office in the morning, and then he'd done the ceremony in the afternoon.
He didn't have to register anything. If it's not a legal ceremony, anybody can conduct a ceremony. It's just someone like myself has a lot more training, basically.
Yeah, I like the idea of a humanist celebrant doing weddings more so than priests, because as you know, you sort of, in the village I grew up in, I knew the priest. I knew a couple of them just because it was a small village, but I don't know if I'd have asked them to do my wedding.
Right.
It's sort of, It's like, I know you, but I don't know you well enough. You know that I'm not religious, and I know that you are religious, and it would feel weird to me.
Yeah.
I'd rather get someone in who I know is not religious or can perform in that capacity without feeling almost like the breath of God on my neck.
Yeah, yeah.
Part of me feels like Mum was getting too old to get married, but I'm not.
Daft.
Yeah. But, I'm sure you'll ask me one day, Mark.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
One of my couples were in their 60s and they were brilliant. They were a brilliant, brilliant couple. And I adored them. They were childhood sweethearts. Then didn't see each other for 25, 30 years. And then they met up again and fell in love again and then got married. How lovely is that?
That's beautiful.
It's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's love doesn't die, does it?
No. So you can sod off with your too old.
I probably will.
What would be involved in your perfect wedding? What elements would make your wedding perfect for you?
I think I'd keep it fairly small.
Right.
With my sort of immediate family and my friends who are my... Not to disrespect my blood family, but my chosen family.
Mm.
I'd have them there, and obviously whoever my bride may be. And then, I think it would be a sort of a nice small affair. I quite like the idea of having one outside.
Mm.
I've been to a few that are outside, and they've always been... Well, the weather's been good for a start, which I really would, pinpoint like a day where there's definitely no chance of it raining.
So you wouldn't be having it in Britain then?
Oh, I don't know. I'd say... I said I used to do filming of weddings, and we went to one that was in a beautiful castle, and as soon as I heard people, dearly beloved, just rained.
Gutted.
But I got a lovely shot of everyone got handed an umbrella on the way in, and I just had this beautiful shot of it was like flowers blooming, just umbrella, 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 umbrella.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I had one, but I had to hold it over the camera because the camera was worth about $2,500.
So your head got wet, but the camera was fine?
My everything got wet. I had to tell him a mum was holding a kid and she didn't have an umbrella, and she looked at me and said, "Can I have your umbrella?" And I had to look this poor woman dead in the eye and went, "No."
She was cheeky to ask you for that. She could clearly see that you were holding it over the expensive equipment. That was shitty of her.
I showed her where another one was, so that was alright, but I was just like, this is far too much money. Your kid will recover from a cold.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think there'd be a lot of messing about in it. I think there would be more done for laughs in some things. Like, I know the guys I'd ask to be my best men would probably roast me.
That's the norm though, right?
Yeah, I don't know how seriously they'd take being my best man, but I know that they'd do a good job. And yeah, part of me feels like there'd probably have to be two ceremonies, one for the wife's side of the family, and then one for my weird group, where they can be themselves. But yeah, definitely. There'd probably be karaoke at some point.
Karaoke party for your wedding, that sounds good.
Yeah, my friend, when we went to New York the day before the wedding, or 2 nights before the wedding, we went to a karaoke bar where we'd booked out the back room, and sang our hearts out for about 2.5 hours.
Marvellous. So, have you had to think about what song you would pick as your first dance?
Ooh, as my first dance, it'd probably be some quite cheesy pop. To be honest, I do like myself some cheesy pop. Part of me would be, again, just because of the way my friend group is, from the people I know in my friend group who worked weddings, there's one song which got played at sort of every wedding that we did, which was "Rule the World" by Take That.
It's a nice song, but yes, I can see how it might be overplayed.
Oh, his eye twitches if he hears it. I'd almost do that just to spite him. maybe for the first 10 seconds, just to watch him go, and then put on something else.
The classic switcheroo of the scratching of the record noise and then something else.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I think, the one that sticks off in my head at the moment is, I don't know if you had a chance to hear it, but when the Jonas Brothers came back, they did a song called Sucker, and that was just a nice sort of song about how they go together and things like that. That's the first thing that pops into my head for a kind of cheesy pop song, and it's upbeat as well. I can't really dance, so I don't know what I'd do.
A lot of couples will just do the walk around slowly dance. You won't be the first person to do that.
Oh, they cling to each other for hope and just well, let's just get through this.
First verse hits, everybody else come and join us on the dance floor, please.
Yeah, I'd probably have that announced before I walked on.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, so we're going to move on to the final section of the show where we do talk about death. And I know we've touched on this quite heavily already, so I think there's, that some of the answers to the questions will be quite obvious. But the first one I always ask people is, are you scared of death?
Yes. It actually can provoke a almost panicked reaction out of me if I think about it sometimes. So I've dealt with stress and anxiety quite a bit over the past few years, probably the past 10 years now. And one of the things that can trigger me is if I hear it on, I don't know if you've ever heard the podcast Films to be Buried With.
I've heard of it, but I've not got round to listening to it, unfortunately. It's one that's on my radar.
Yeah, it's very good, but I ended up having to stop listening to it because part of the premise is, you've died, what films would you have buried with you?
Right.
But it got into quite a few discussions on there where people talk about the end and things like that. And it's a very physical reaction in that I get a cold chill and I become quite panicked, or I can become quite panicked. Normally if I'm on my own, and I've listened to podcasts where it's happened and I've kind of had to skip forward, or I've seen people talk about it and I've had to switch over or just leave that bit. It depends what my general state is at the time, but it can really alter my mood. I can be perfectly fine, and then if I start thinking about it, it can freak me out. And I've never really admitted that in public.
It seems like a pretty brave move to come on this podcast, then. You knew what you were in for.
I know. I'd kind of made the decision I would talk about it because just see if other people do as well, if they hear it, sort of if they get a similar thing. But it does freak me out, but I also know it's the most inevitable thing in the world.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
It is.
And it's kind of... but it's sort of the thing of one day I'm not going to be here.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a moment where it stops, and I'm probably going to be awake for that bit. And I don't know what's going to happen, and that's what freaks me out. I wouldn't want to say I'd want to die in my sleep, but almost if the last thing I did was good night everybody, and go to bed, and that was it. That might be the way forward to me, but I really don't want to be one of those where he's lying in his bed going oh, it's all been quite marvellous, hasn't it? And then look out the window and go, nurse! And that's it, it's over.
Huh.
I don't know. I'd probably run into a flaming orphanage or something like that.
I mean, there's so many cliches about death, aren't there? And you just named 3.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's I almost can't calm myself down about it because it's not something I can go through and go, well, that wasn't too bad. It's unless there is something going on after we leave this planet, but which I don't think there is. But it's it's probably the thing I worry about the most. As I said, my mother passed away from cancer. My dad had heart problems from the age of 25.
Right.
And he died at 50.
Good grief.
Which isn't anywhere near an age to go.
No.
And he was complaining about it the whole time. I'm 50, I know. It's sort of don't like it. It was well, there's not a great deal you can do about it.
No.
And then he passed away. So he figured something out. But
oh, wow.
I can joke about these things. It's my way of dealing with it. Even after all this time, I'll still make a joke about stuff like that. But yeah, there's not a lot you can do about it. It's going to happen eventually. It'll, but hopefully I'll be, 85 and barking mad, so I won't really notice.
I've had a lot of people say they're not scared of death on this podcast, and I've got a lot of respect for it, but I feel like you, to be honest with you. It scares the hell out of me.
Yeah, I think it's because it's almost, I think of there's so much to do, or there's so much I want to do, and I haven't done it yet, and that all ties into the, have I wasted a lot of time doing this or doing that or not doing these things? And, there's a whole story about that, but things like that, and then you go, because I've always worked off the idea of it's 70 years and 10, isn't it? The average age, which is 75.
Right.
I was like, oh God, I'm halfway through. And then it's sort of like, and then you kind of go, hang on, I'm only halfway through.
Yeah. But
then you kind of take into account, well, when I hit a certain point, you're going to physically start deteriorating if you're not looking after yourself. So there could be a period of time where you're not really able to. Yeah. You won't be able to spring about like you did like when you were 20 unless you're Diamond Dallas Page.
Nice wrestling reference there, Carl.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's a yoga magnate now, isn't he? But he's nearly 70 and he's springy as anything.
Oh yeah, what's it called?
DDP yoga.
DDP yoga, yeah. He's a yogi.
Yeah, and he's stopped wrestling because his back was ruined. And now he's 70 years old and he's probably more sprightly than a few 25-year-olds.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd love to be like that. It's sort of like, you see, like my grandfather was a farmer and the only reason he started to really deteriorate was because he didn't have the farm anymore.
Right.
He kind of just stopped and he used to sit in his armchair and smoke constantly and watch telly, and eventually he was diabetic, he got gangrene in one foot and lost that below the knee, and then towards the very end he lost the other one, and it was horrible. But
yeah, I think there's an element of truth in the cliche that people do worry about stopping working, because sometimes people do deteriorate fast when they're no longer active. There's a lady at the library I used to work at. She's in her 70s and she's not quitting. She doesn't want to quit. She's happy. And she's like, if I slow down, I'll slow down too much. I wonder whether it's a cliche or whether it's for realsies, and from what you're saying with your granddad, it really is for real.
It is, because, I mean, when we closed up shop, literally, my mother had passed away by that point, and it was just me and my dad, and I was at college at the time and then working, so he was on his own a lot. And he knew that he had to do something because otherwise he was going to go stir crazy. And he ended up working for his friend who sold cars. So he didn't sell cars, but he would drive them to where they were ordered, wherever in the country that may be, and then catch a train back or catch the bus back. So he was doing that, or he'd go and pick up cars. So he was getting about, and he was driving and keeping himself active. And I used to hear from him from wherever he was, and he knew that he had to do something because because obviously he'd have seen his own father deteriorate after not having the farm.
Yeah.
And I think he kind of had that thing of, well, I'll be damned if that's going to happen to me. Yeah. And I'm a bit like that of, I'll be damned if that's going to happen to me. So I'm a large person, and I've noticed that parts of my body have started to deteriorate.
Right.
My back hurts a bit right now. My knees are kind of buggered.
I'm slim and my back hurts. I'm not sure it's anything to do with being a big lad.
I think some of it is from just carrying the weight around and not being as active as I was previously. Because before, for a big lad, I was quite active. And I've not been in the last couple of months, and it's only in the last couple of months that it started to hurt more.
Right.
And that's why I need to get back out there. And I keep seeing people, you see people who are like, oh, wait, I don't know if you know him, you probably do. Fraser Thomas?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was what? He was 30 stone, 40 stone?
Yeah, he was a big boy.
Yeah, and now he's trimmed right the way down because he had the sleeve, and it was really inspiring listening to him talk about that.
Mm.
And part of me wonders if I could do something similar, ideally without getting surgery.
Yeah.
And, I'll never be thin. I've never been thin. I've always been built like a Tasmanian devil. So I'll never be like my doctor once said to me, he goes, I like to think of you as a hooker, Carl. Do you understand what that means? It's like, I'm really hoping rugby. But which he meant.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, if he put his hand on my shoulder and gone, well, you're a very attractive man, Carl, it was like, well, this has taken a change.
I mean, that doesn't seem like good practice.
No, but, my parents have been happy I'd been seeing a doctor.
Yeah.
But, so that's the next thing for me is, as daft as it sounds, is to focus on not dying.
Well,
because my father had a heart attack at 25, and he was not a large man. He was, I watched him have one when I was a kid, which is something I remembered, which was terrifying.
I bet it was.
But my dad was a very tough. He was tough. My dad. He had to be with the amount of stuff he went through. He was one of the first people to have a certain type of pacemaker in his body and things like that. And he used to tell me they had to break all of his ribs in order to put it in and things like that. And after about 15 years of him having it, they said, look, we can take out this big thing that you've got in your body and we can put one in that's like the size of, a pen or something like that, but we're going to have to break your ribs again. And he said no, because he kind of worked on the theory of, if I go in again, I'm probably not coming back out.
No, fair enough.
Yeah, and that was where the conversations me and my dad had in the last couple of years of his life were very him prepping for what was going to if anything happened to him,
right,
and what I could do. So it was an interesting time. But now, as I'm getting older, I'm becoming more and more aware of need to do something in terms of keeping myself a bit in better shape, because I'm in the second half of the stretch.
You are nowhere near the kind of size I'm about to talk about. But I was talking to a member of staff from Manchester Crematorium the other day while I was waiting for a funeral to turn up, and they have a lot of people come from all over the country, because they have one of the largest crematoriums. And I don't mean capacity, I mean the actual incinerator.
Yeah.
And so if you're over a certain size, you might have to travel to Manchester if you want a cremation. And I never really thought about it until we were just chatting. And I did have a funeral for a bigger person not so long ago. And the coffin was a very different shape to what's a standard coffin. And it was square. Yeah. It was a big square coffin.
That's something I want to avoid. I'll never go I want to be normal, because I'm not. I'm a strange individual, and I enjoy the fact that I'm a strange individual.
Fuck normal.
Exactly. But when it comes to being buried, or incinerated, I'd quite like to be in a normal-sized coffin. Just so people go, oh, he's lost weight. When my grandfather... This guy goes to show mine and my dad's sense of humour. When my grandfather was buried, because he had no legs below his knees, it was a small coffin.
Oh, dear.
But it turned up, and they took it out, and me and my dad stood there, and it was one of those moments, when your eyes kind of bulge out of your head and you're trying really hard not to laugh at something because it's highly inappropriate.
Yes.
We were both stood there oh God, it is small, isn't it? It's smaller than they said it was going to be. Oh God. And it was white as well, so it was just it looks like a child's one. Oh God.
Oh dear.
But the thing is, that's the thing is, I'm terrified of death, but I can find the humour in it.
Yeah, and I think you have to.
Yeah, that's the way forward on it. But Yeah, I need to get in better, because I don't want to die early. You know, no, it's sort of...
Nobody does, I don't think.
Yeah, my mates have got kids I want to watch grow up, and I've got my own godson I want to watch grow up, and I want to be a crazy old man.
Good. You'd make a really good crazy old man.
Yeah, I want a rocking chair and a cane.
I've already got a rocking chair.
No, I've got a cane. To be fair, somebody gave me one. It's a metal one with a resin skull that's chest patterned on the top of it, and that is going to be mine when I'm sitting on the rocking chair.
How beautifully peculiar.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your funeral. Do you want to be buried or cremated?
I think cremated.
Okay. What's the reasoning for that?
I think that when you're gone, you're gone. I like the idea that I've been thrown into the wind, then I am just sitting on the ground, if you know what I mean. My parents are both cremated, but we buried the ashes. Okay, yeah. Which was actually their instruction, from what I remember.
So do they have gravestones then?
That they do. They're back in Riddings. My dad, in a bit of a maudlin sort of preparation, he bought one that was shaped like a book.
I think that's a lovely gravestone.
Yeah, and one side of it is my mum with all her details, and he'd already paid for, when he went, for him to be put on the other side.
Oh, that's so lovely.
Yeah, and my grandparents have a similar one as well, but smaller. I must admit, I haven't been back in a long while, because I kind of work on the theory of I'd rather use my memories than go look at a stone.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, part of me thinks now with all, podcasts and videos and stuff that I've done, you wouldn't really need to go look at a stone to remember me, because there'll be a lot of it knocking about if you ever want to hear my voice or remember what I looked like.
That's how I feel too.
Yeah. So if you if they want to put me, because I know one friend of mine, an older friend of mine, when he passed away a few years ago, he was put in a garden of remembrance.
Right.
So his ashes were scattered in there, rather than having a grave, from what I remember.
Yeah.
And that was a nice way to go. But I kind of like the idea of sending my best friends up a mountain and getting them to throw it off the side. That kind of thing.
Brilliant.
Just something like that. And it's... You're not going to be there for it.
No.
I almost am not that bothered about what my service is going to be like, because I'm not going to be there.
I mean, it's the classic argument, isn't it? That it's not for you, it's for your family.
Yeah.
But my counter to that would be is, if it's personalised in a way that they know that you contributed to it, it makes it more personal to them.
Yeah, I think I would plan it so it would have that thing to it. I'd leave instructions, basically. Yeah. I wouldn't do the crazy thing of everybody's got to turn up in fishing waders and, all that kind of stuff.
I've had some brilliant ones of those, and I love them. I love a dress code for a funeral. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I'd probably get them to, wear a purple tie or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't need to be crazy, crazy, crazy.
No.
I've been to funerals as a mourner where, it wasn't crazy, but it's just a nice little touch. Like, a friend of mine died in his early 30s, and he was a wrestler, and he always wore pink when he wrestled. His name's Chris Travis. And everybody that was attending the funeral was told to wear pink. And there was like a sea of boys with their pink ties. It was ace.
That'd be something I'd like. It's I don't know if you've ever seen this clip. It's a fairly famous clip of Graham Chapman from Monty Python.
Yes, I've seen it.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
I'd quite like my service to be like that, in that people are looking at when I did the speech at my father's funeral, and I kind of failed, but I tried to make them laugh. Because I wanted, and I said, he wouldn't want us all be sitting here oh God, he's dead.
Yeah.
He'd want us to carry on. He'd want us to celebrate. Because that's the thing I find in death, especially in funerals, is people always focus on, he wasn't very well towards the end. that was the last, could have been the last 6 months. Before that, there was decades of tittered about and made us laugh and stuff like that. And I'd rather people focused on that when I'm gone than, he was never the same after he ran into that burning orphanage. But, I'd rather have, he did a lot of podcasts. Oh, you could talk about Red Dwarf, couldn't it? Things like that. And that's the thing. I've kind of had the idea over the last few years of leaving a sort of a body of work, as it were. Not in terms of yes, I do podcasts, I do videos, I do stuff like that, but in terms of stuff that people know I've done, if it's sort of the way I was with my godson or my friends' kids, or things like that, just to leave a lasting effect.
Yeah,
I'd rather have that than I think anything else.
And I think a good funeral will remind people of the things that made them happy about this person, and remind them that these memories are what you should be treasuring rather than the sorrow of having lost someone. And I take great pride in the idea that people will think back on the ceremony and smile rather than be sad. If I've done that for someone, then I've done a good job.
I'd want... how you sometimes in funerals, it's mostly on TV adaptations, but there's a picture of them next to the coffin or whatever.
Never seen that.
No, I'd probably have one, a big one, with me doing the cheesy, hey, put double point and grin, buddy Christ, sort of.
Brilliant.
That'd be something I'd insist upon, because it's the thing of I can't be too sad. I'm looking at a picture of Carl doing the buddy Christ pose.
Yeah.
So almost like I'm still there.
Yeah.
Or that what my essence was is still there. That'd be something I'd enjoy.
I think
so. That'd be something I think other people would enjoy.
Well, you're currently enjoying it, the thought of it, but other people can enjoy it in future, yeah. Have you thought about any readings that you'd like to be read at your funeral?
Ooh. Nothing religious. I think it would probably be a speech from a film or something like that.
You like film? That makes sense.
Yeah, I like film. It would be something like that. I'd probably, I'd be up for the idea of just letting my friends do their own speech. But readings, again, it would probably be something silly. It would probably be something silly that I'd write.
That's a nice idea. I've had that before, is someone's, when they were close to death, wrote a letter to be read at their funeral. And it was lovely.
Yeah, it would probably be something I'd written telling people to not be sad.
Yeah.
And then maybe a knob gag in there somewhere.
Oh, everybody loves a knob gag.
Exactly. It's, how do you want to go out? Laughing and knob gags. But, I'd probably do that, actually. Think about this. That's the thing, it's I will think about death and it will worry me, but I never tend to think about, how would I prepare for it? And to be honest, the reason why I've been so open about it on this podcast is I'm kind of using it myself a bit selfishly as a bit therapeutic to get it out there and to talk about it. Because, I probably would prepare my own funeral as my final joke to tell people.
And there's nothing wrong with that, man.
No, exactly.
So, final question in this section is my favourite because I just like music. What music tracks would you select for the entrance, reflection, and exit in your funeral?
For the entrance, there's a few.
That's the thing, you only get to pick 3. 1 for the entrance, 1 for the quiet reflection, and 1 for the exit. You only get 1 funeral, mate.
Yeah. The first song off the top of my head for the entrance would actually be the theme song for Shinsuke Nakamura.
Brilliant.
Just something hugely epic. Not the one with the vocals on it, just the instrumental one with the violin and the guitars. And
the original with the amazing drop. Maybe you could ask everyone to wait until the drop, and that's when they start to walk in.
Yeah, I'd probably have it where instead of having the coffin there, almost like a wedding, have everybody in there, have the music played, then bring the coffin in.
You can do that. I've had funerals where people have done that.
Yeah, just sort of have them. Don't tell them what it's going to be. Have them stood there, and then you hear bow, 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 and the coffin comes in slowly, just down the middle, like making my own entrance to my own funeral. That'd probably be the one.
Huh. I've not seen that. I've had like the congregation go in first, and then the coffin follow. But I've not had like everyone walk in silently, and then the coffin get an entrance like the bride. Brilliant. Do it, Carl.
Yes, absolutely. That's how I want to go.
Amazing.
For the moment of quiet reflection, I'd probably pick, because I know quite a few musicians. I'd probably pick one of theirs. My friend Joe Brown has written a lot of beautiful songs over the years. I'd probably pick one of his, but.
Well, that's nice. That's like deeply personal that you picked a friend's song rather than, I don't know, something by Linkin Park or Elton John.
Yeah, and we went to we had a funeral. We had a funeral. We went to a funeral of a friend of ours who he died very young, and he was a musician as well. And he had people playing. His parents had people playing at his funeral, and that to me was interesting. I don't think I could put any of my musician friends through that.
Right.
But that's an interesting one, I think, to do, is have somebody playing. But I think I'd probably play one of his songs rather than anything like that.
That's a nice choice.
To exit, I've actually just started looking at my Spotify playlist of random songs that I listen to fairly regularly. And there's two off the top of my head which stick out, and these probably wouldn't be the ones I'd use, but at the moment they're the ones that are most appealing to me. One is the track Ashes from the Deadpool 2 soundtrack.
Celine Dion.
To Celine Dion. Because that would be one where it is a very emotional song, but I know that people who know me would be stood there going, oh, for God's sake, Carl. Because they know I'd have picked it.
Because it's in fucking Deadpool.
Yeah, he's picked something like that, and especially if I'm being cremated and it goes down, and it starts singing the "Let Beauty Come Out of Ashes" chorus line, that would make me laugh. Hi Ho Silver from Boone would be
really
funny. And what's the other one that I was thinking that's really stupid? Oh, Pony by Genuine.
Really?
The version by Far, because it's so inappropriate. And if I was there, it would make me cry with laughter. So if there is any like afterlife or angels or anything like that, I'd beg St. Peter at the gates to go, can I just go watch my funeral? I put a lot of work into it. And I just want to go and see everyone's faces for when any of these songs kick in. And yeah, I'd probably go with Ashes. I think Ashes would be funny. It'd fit as well, sort of. It fit my personality. Big, loud. Shinsuke Nakamura on the way in.
Honestly.
Something by my friend Joe and his band, one of his bands in the middle. I mean, my father, both of them actually. My mum, she had, it was songs that me and my dad couldn't stand, but because she used to play them all the time. But she had Search for the Hero by M People.
Bloody hell.
Yeah. And then Unchained Melody.
Oh.
But it was the Robson and Jerome version of Unchained Melody.
Oh, mate.
Yeah.
I wish you hadn't. I've got to put that on the fucking playlist now.
Yeah. Well, just put mine on. But, she had that, which we picked. We picked it because, like, what songs did she like? I'm like, well, there's these ones. My dad, he had... I don't think we had one going in, but we had These Are the Days of Our Lives by Queen.
Oh, hell of a song.
Hell of a song. And the fact that, obviously, if you've seen the video, the visuals of of that, and it is basically it's a goodbye letter from Freddie Mercury.
Yeah, it is.
It kind of felt right playing the song that has the "I Still Love You" at the end as people are leaving, and it was. I can't remember what he went in with. Probably something daft, Motorhead or something like that. But that was definitely the one we played on the way out. And this was before churches had PA systems, I think, pretty much, because I just remember having a little CD player in the corner.
Yeah.
I said I did the speech earlier on. You'll like this, I had a very Father Dougal moment. The button that drops the coffin is in the pulpit.
Yes. In
my internal monologue at the time was me going, he wouldn't want everyone to be sad. Push the button, Carl. It's sort of blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah. Go on, push it, it'll be funny. Sort of da-da-da-da-da. And then just that thing of, he'll think it was funny, he's not here. Go on, do it.
Did you do it?
No. I wish, it's one of my regrets. I wish I had done, because there's a great deal of my family I don't particularly get on with, and a lot of them were there. But I think if he'd have been there, he'd have laughed at me going, and da-da-da-da-da, smack, button down, hey!
Brilliant.
Priest wouldn't have probably been happy with me, but...
No. That's his fault for leaving the button in front of you.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Big red button. I looked at it and looked at him, and there was just this non-vocal communication of, yes, Carl, that is the button that you think it is.
Yeah.
It's like, right. Yeah. But that's something I remember from that. I've been to a lot of funerals, to be honest. It's never fun, but you kind of make the best of what you can.
Yeah, and I think yours will be about as fun as it's possible for them to be.
2 words: bouncy funeral.
Bouncy funeral.
Inflatable funeral. In a pool.
No, oh dear.
I want one of my friends to get super rich and successful because then they can pay for it. Yeah. I mean, we were talking the other day, and this has just happened. Someone I know did pass away recently, and they streamed the funeral because we can't go at the moment.
Yep. It's been happening a lot recently.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly didn't watch because I found it a bit too upsetting to watch, but I actually thought it was a very good thing, especially if you've got family in other countries and stuff like that. They can attend, and obviously in these situations, as hopefully one-off as it is, this situation, that they could do it. Because I know you said you'd done a few that were like that.
Yeah, I've had them filmed and things like that as well. I've had one where the PA system was rigged to go outside as well as inside the creme so that people could stand in the car park socially distanced and listen to it when they couldn't fit the number of people they wanted inside the crematorium itself. There's been some quite innovative stuff, actually.
Yeah, I have been to one where more people turned up than we thought, and it was sort of, everyone was piled out of the creme, and they ended up putting some speakers up so we could all hear the service. And it didn't really work, so I was just stood at the back going, I cannot hear a thing. But I'm here to pay my respects. And I think it caught because it was a gentleman I used to live with when I lived above a pub. He was in one of the other rooms, an older gent. He came across very much like a loner. Lovely chap, but very much he was used to being on his own.
Yeah.
And I think he had kids, he saw them every so often. But he was, I think they were surprised at how many people who'd met him and adored him turned up to the service, because there was a lot of us.
You can never predict with people.
No, absolutely not.
When I started out, I had a funeral where I thought this lady was like one of the most popular ladies I'd ever do a funeral for. So I wrote into the script thanking the large number of people that had come, and hardly anyone turned up. So you can't predict. So I don't write scripts like that anymore. No,
when my mother passed away, we took, I think we did it like middle of the day on a weekday. So we didn't just because this was when the chapel was available.
Yeah,
and it was only a small chapel, so like not many people are going to come. Just immediate family and things like that. But they ended up having to put about 4 more rows of chairs in because she'd met, obviously living in the local shop for 13 years.
Yeah,
she made friends with so many people, and we were stood there like, this is brilliant. You know, that there's so many people here, and yeah, it was amazing, and it was very touching as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can never tell.
No, you really can't. Well, Carl, it's been an incredible episode of the show. Thank you so much for being so candid. I knew, that you'd lost your parents when you were young, and I wasn't sure how much you were going to talk about it, but the fact that you were so open about it, I think it will make a difference to some people listening in, I think.
I hope so. I say it's been good to share. Thank you for having me on, so I've had the opportunity to do that.
So, Carl, where can people find you on the internet?
So, I am on a few different shows. I'm on Shipwrecked and Comatose with your good self.
It's a bit different to this podcast, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not as heavy going.
No.
So I'm on that one with yourself. I'm also on my own one called Cerebral Jukebox, where I talk about song earworms that got stuck in people's heads. Also, I do a lot of other things, like I say, I host short film nights and quiz nights and this, that and the other. If you want to find any of these online, you can go to All My Links page that I've got, which is allmylinks/Mr. Carl, and it's MISTER.
Brilliant. And before we go, last chance, any other plugs?
I don't think it's stay safe, wear a mask, look after yourselves.
All good advice, Carl. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just want to say one more time, thank you so much to Carl for being a brilliant guest on Life's Milestones. Candid, kind, open and honest, and all the sad stuff kind of interspersed with some brilliant stuff too. Thank you, Carl, you're brilliant. If you liked what you heard, Carl and I have podcasted all over the We Made This Podcast network and beyond. Carl is a regular guest host on Shipwrecked and Comatose, which is a podcast about Red Dwarf, with me as one of the hosts. If you're interested in that, that's at Red Dwarf Pod on Twitter. Carl has also been a guest on Pull or Pass, which is a comic book show on the We Made This Podcast network. If you're interested in that, at Pull or Pass on Twitter. Carl was also a guest on Super Tap Film Club, which is a podcast I do outside of the network, and that's about kind of B-movies and martial arts movies and stuff like that. That's at Tap Club on Twitter. And Carl has also been a guest on my podcast Don't Say the C Word. That's not running anymore, but it is still up on the We Made This Podcast network, and on that one, Carl actually goes into more detail about what it was like living in a video shop growing up. And finally, I've been a guest on Carl's podcast. That one is called Cerebral Jukebox, at Cerebral Jukebox on Twitter. So, thank you for listening to Life's Milestones, and I'll see you in a fortnight. Life's Milestones is a podcast by me, Mark Adams. Follow me on Twitter at MarkAdamsHC. That's also my handle for Instagram. If you're looking for my website, it's www.humanist.org.uk/Mark Adams. If you're looking for my Facebook, it's Mark Adams Humanist Celebrant. All the information on how to use me as your celebrant is there. The show's social media is at Life's Milestones on Twitter. Other than that, I am just using my celebrant contacts for the show. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Elsewhere on We Made This. Motion pictures.
Cinemas reopening here, and they have this list. It's like 450 films or something. You know, you're talking about The Empire Strikes Back, The Shining, or whatever. They've got a big list of what they're allowed to show. And there are some old films on there that are like pretty cringy today, like things like Breakfast at Tiffany's, where you have, I don't know if you've seen that film. But,
I haven't, no, actually.
Mickey Rooney plays Audrey Hepburn's like Japanese neighbour, and it's
Oh God,
it's probably one of my least favourite performances ever.
is this like Laurence Olivier playing the Sudanese like revolutionary in Khartoum in the 60s, where he was black top essentially?
It's terrible. It leans into all the stereotypes.
God. Right in the childhood.
So I've got lots of stuff like The Tripods, Dark Season, Brave Star, Nightmare, Robin of Sherwood, goodness knows what else that I'm going to be bringing to the table.
None of which I've actually heard of. That's not even... I was thinking I'd maybe, like when we came up with this idea, I thought, I'll know a few. None at all.
So, these are things roughly from 1981 to 1995. Whereas, what are you bringing to the table?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I'm bringing Fairly Odd Parents, Power Rangers, Digimon, Drake and Josh, Recess and Lizzie McGuire for the first few, and then we'll get some more going.
I've heard of Power Rangers.
Yeah. So are you saying you've not heard of these either?
No.
We played this.
So what is it about the Final Fantasy, and especially Final Fantasy VII? What do you like about that series?
There's a lot that I like about the series. I love the system of materia and how you can actually raise that up instead of improving certain stats. Well, you can improve stats as well, but that's not really where the focus is. It's more about getting all of this magical energy up to its highest level, and then it has babies, and you have new ones, and that's so adorable.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.